Thank you for checking into the Office of Assessment and Accreditation's training on student complaints. In order for UNCG to offer financial aid, it is necessary for the university to comply with federal regulations. UNCG's compliance with those regulations is reported as part of our accreditation agency's principles. Federal Requirement 4.5 in the Principles of Accreditation for the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges states that the institution has adequate procedures for addressing written student complaints and is responsible for demonstrating that it follows those procedures when resolving student complaints. Proof of compliance is outlined in SAC-COC's policy statement, which says each institution is required to have in place student complaint policies and procedures that are reasonable, fairly administered, and well publicized. The Commission also requires, in accordance with federal regulations, that each institution maintains a record of complaints received by the institution. During the reaffirmation of accreditation process, an on-site committee will review the university's logs of student complaints. It is therefore essential that each UNCG department keep a record of student complaints they receive. The Office of Assessment and Accreditation has put a process in place that will satisfy the requirement and will help departments collect and report the necessary information. UNCG has developed a definition of student complaints that need to be reported. The parameters are: the student must be enrolled and taking classes at the university. The complaint must be against a university policy and includes grade appeals. In a later slide, we will share the link to a website where relevant policies can be found. To be considered a loggable complaint, the student needs to submit it in writing. An email would be considered written since the email address is accepted as a signature. Until there is a change in HB2, we are currently collecting those complaints on these logs as well. All complaints are important and should be addressed, but it is just the complaints that meet these criteria that need to be reported on the student complaint log. To summarize, a complaint against policy is logged when a student indicates in writing that UNCG did not follow a policy or procedure. It's important to note, though, that a student may not cite a particular policy, but violation of a policy may be inferred within the complaint. Policies that affect students are listed on the Dean of Students website referenced on this slide. You should at least familiarize yourself with them. Some examples of comments that may or may not be considered complaints are listed on the following slides. These examples show complaints that may or may not need to be logged. In the first example, the student is missing class for what appears to be a legitimate reason. But the student is complaining against a faculty policy, not a university policy, and the faculty member is actually adhering to their own policy. This is not considered a student complaint that we need to track to show compliance with federal regulations. This next example, where the student submits a retroactive grade appeal, would need to be logged. All grade appeals should appear on this log, but the student's first office would track them. Academic departments do not need to add official grade appeal forms to their lists, but they should keep track of communications that lead to grade appeals. The complaint against parking would not be logged because it is not a complaint against policy. It is a complaint against circumstance or process. We need to emphasize here that any of these complaints could become an issue that needs to be tracked if the student indicates that they are experiencing discrimination. If the first student stated or even implied that the faculty member or parking office was treating them differently because of gender, race, disability, etc., that complaint would definitely need to be added to the log and referred to the Dean of Students' office. The next complaint is another example of a grade appeal that would need to be logged. This is the start of the grade appeal process where the student initiates the informal grade appeal process. Before entering the formal grade appeal process, the grade appeal policy in the undergraduate and graduate bulletins directs the students to discuss the concerns with the instructor and then the department head, dean, and provost if they choose. These communications, when written, should be logged as a student complaint. Because this situation in the last example infers a difference in treatment, this complaint may need to be logged, but the issue would first need clarification. The previous examples show that it is not only important to understand what should be included on the log, but also what does not need to be recorded. If the complaint is verbal or anonymous, it should not appear on the log. This log only needs to be a record of signed, written complaints. While it's still important to help a student resolve his or her issue, if a student chooses not to write down their complaint and sign it in some way, it does not need to be logged. When a faculty member initiates a process of student policy violation, this does not need to be included as a student complaint. This would be a circumstance such as a violation of the academic integrity policy, like catching a student cheating on a test. If the student then challenges that the policy was violated in their case, then it does become a complaint lodged by the student, and that written complaint would need to be logged. Complaints from parents, community members, or any non-matriculated student would not be included. This log is focused on student complaints. And finally, those times when students write in complaints that are a matter of preference, such as what's served in the cafeteria, or that they don't like having a poster sale in the EUC, are not logged. Again, UNCG's process for student complaints clearly requires that they be written and signed in some way from a student and based on a policy violation. We have received questions about whether student complaints that faculty do not strictly follow the syllabi should be logged. While the syllabus provides guidelines for students, it is not considered a contract and the instructor is free to change it at any time. These complaints should not go on the log. However, faculty are encouraged to provide clear and timely information on any changes to avoid complaints. There will no doubt be times when the complaint is questionable as to whether it should be logged or not. Always include it if you're not sure. The Office of Assessment and Accreditation has a process in place to ensure that we have documentation to support our compliance. Near the beginning of the fall semester, departments or units will receive an email and a copy of the log template as a reminder to record complaints. It is not necessary to use this template if you have another means of tracking complaints, but it is there for your convenience. Please take a look at the downloadable log on the website and contact Kim Zink if you have any questions. If you use your own version of the template, this information should be included on any log sent to OAA. In March or April, another email will go out to remind departments and units that we will be collecting the logs for that academic year by July 31st. If you have no complaints, please send an email stating that there were none. And all logs should be forwarded to Kim Zink. If you have any questions, please contact Kim Zink at 336-334-5445 or kpzinke@uncg.edu or Jody Pedizzoni at 336 334-5535 or jepettaz@uncg.edu. Thank you for your attention to student complaints.